Hey, welcome to Slinging Pixels. In my last episode, I talked about design software, namely the Adobe Creative Cloud Suite. Now, they basically own the market, and that's no surprise. Their software is amazing. But depending on your needs, there are some viable, less expensive alternatives. Now, although they don't have the variety of apps that Adobe offers yet, I really love a company called Serif Software and their Affinity line of design apps. Now, Serif has actually been around for a really long time, making software exclusively for Windows. In 2014, they switched their focus to the Mac and started their Affinity line: Affinity Designer, Affinity Photo, and Affinity Publisher. Designer is like a mix between Illustrator and Photoshop. It's mainly a vector app, but it has raster tools built right in. Now, sure, Photoshop and Illustrator both have those features too, but Affinity Designer kind of mixes them in a way that is much more cohesive and natural. It just works really, really well. Affinity Photo is kind of like a combo of Photoshop and Lightroom, and as you probably already guessed, Affinity Publisher is similar to InDesign. There's no subscription, so you're not in danger of getting shut out of the apps if you can't afford them or you're just not interested in the new features. And along with that, they are cheap. As of the making of this video, each of the desktop versions costs only $55. That rocks the universe. Now, these apps can both open Illustrator and Photoshop files, and you can even export to a native PSD file. Vector work can be exported as either EPS or SVG files. As I mentioned, the desktop versions are only $55 and they're available for both Mac and Windows. Affinity Publisher is only available for desktop computers, which makes sense, but the place where Designer and Photo really shine is on the iPad, and those are only $22 each. Can you believe that? Affinity Designer is especially great on an iPad. Using it with the Apple Pencil is like the perfect combination of software and hardware. Now, I gotta be honest, I don't really use the desktop versions too often. Unfortunately, I just don't have the time to become proficient in them while I'm working, when I can do everything I need to do with Adobe's apps. But if you've just graduated from design school and you don't have a lot of money yet, you might want to check these out. You could get your career rolling without having to spend a lot of money right off the bat. Now, like I said, I don't use the desktop versions very often, but I use Designer on the iPad all the time for both professional and personal illustration work. It's pretty damn near perfect in my opinion. Now, I gotta give Adobe credit. They have definitely improved their tablet offerings with Fresco, Illustrator, and Photoshop, but none of them are on par with Affinity Designer yet, in my opinion. Another really cool thing about the Affinity line is their workbooks. And these are not your typical user manuals. They're more like project guides in that they walk you through a project and you learn by doing and not reading. There's a workbook for each title: Affinity Designer, Affinity Photo, and Affinity Publisher, and they run about $50 each. I'll post links to them below. They are really worthwhile if you want to learn to use their software. I should mention I have absolutely no affiliation with Serif Software whatsoever. I just really, really love the Affinity apps. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that Adobe doesn't buy the company and kill their software like they did with Macromedia and Freehand. That's all for now. Thanks for joining me on Slinging Pixels. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button, and better yet, hit that beautiful red subscribe button so you know when my next episode drops. Drops? Am I too old to say that? Chaco says yes.